Okay, you're on.
Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. My name's Elizabeth Kelly. If my voice starts to trail off and you can't hear me, please yell and I'll speak up. So, yes, welcome to our first annual Echoes of History, Saving Trinidad's Past. So I'm Elizabeth and I'm a member of the Historic Preservation Commission with the City of Trinidad. It's a 5-member commission. We have a couple of other folks, Derek Thomas, if you want to raise your hand, Derek. And we also have Ms. Jana Remington, who is our chair, Ms. Jean Delicio, and then Ms. Shirley. So 5 of us. And we represent a commission that was initiated in 2015 under the city municipal code. And part of our role is to do community outreach, so that's what we're trying to do today. So my remarks will be very brief, and then we'll turn it over to Tom to talk about this beautiful structure. But I do want to take a minute. We did, this last year or so, put together a brochure for the commission, and this goes over what we do. And mostly what the public sees, I think, is the landmarking effort that the commission has undertaken over the years. So in 2021, the Carnegie, I always say Carnegie, is it Carnegie or Carnegie? Carnegie.
Officially.
Library and the Chappell House were both landmarked in 2021. And then just recently in 2022, Fort Wooten Memorial Square, just a couple blocks from here, was landmarked. So that's a couple of the historic structures that we've worked on. Coming up, City Hall, Kit Carson Bandstand, the Firehouse Museum, and the clubhouse out at the golf course. So I don't know how many of you have seen all those structures, but we are planning to go through the landmark process with them. Historic Preservation Commissions do lots of things, though. We also sponsor surveys. The lion's share of the work, we are a volunteer commission, is done by our planning administrator, Chris Hall. And she helps get the surveys done, make sure that the city is well prepared and understands what the nature of its historic structures are. So that's really part of that role. We also administer incentives to people that want to landmark. And if you're interested in having more information, please take a look at this. It kind of tells you what's involved with landmarking, what are some of the advantages, etc. And then you can just contact us. And if you're interested in working with the commission more, just holler again at myself. Jean's coming in, Miss Jana. If you have questions, check with them. But most importantly, what we're doing here today is about storytelling, right? So we have historic preservation usually evokes, buildings and bricks and mortar. But what we really want to emphasize is the storytelling that goes on. All the stories that have been told here, that you're going to hear from Tom, all the stories that are told by all of you that I'm sure have stories of your own to tell. And then the second half of our program is going to be across the street, close to 4 o'clock. We're going to have music, some refreshments, just more informal sort of networking, but also a presentation by an individual who put together, basically it's an audio tour of this wonderful publication that I've got to acknowledge the Trinidad Historical Society put together. And you see that? So this is a really detailed walking tour and is now done, there's an app or a link that you can, and we're going to demonstrate how that works when we head back over to the History Museum. But it reminds me, and before I get ahead of myself, I do want to thank the Trinidad Historical Society for all the work they've done over the years. Friends of Trinidad, who sponsors all kinds of events throughout the year, including the Soaproast reunions that are held each year. Mr. Bobby Vigil, are you here today? Who, I'm not going to try to read the name of your Facebook page because it's kind of long, But it's wonderful. If you haven't seen it, it's a Colorado, Trinidad historical memorabilia. It's got a lot of cool pictures on it. Lots of good stories. It's amazing. And he's part of the storytelling tradition that we have. So as I said, when we're done here, we're going to walk across the street to the Baca Bloom Gardens and enjoy some refreshments and some community. Very quickly, before Tom comes on, we're going to hand it over to Tom Potter, who is our local adult services librarian at the library. He knows lots about our history. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yep.
Thanks for the opportunity to plug the library too. This will be short. But first of all, the library is right across from City Hall, if you don't know, 202 North Animas. It's been there since 1904, and it is a national landmark. And I've worked there for about 6 years. One of my jobs is I manage the local history archive at the library. It's called the History Room, and it was accumulated for the most part by the Trinidad Historical Society, but it's now housed in the library, and one of my jobs is making it available to the public. So first of all, I'd like to just tell you real briefly what we have. Probably the most important thing is a very extensive microfilm collection. Most of that is newspapers from, let's say, around 1870 to the present. And there were quite a few local newspapers in Trinidad through the years. We also have other microfilm records, census records, coroner reports. Let's see what else. Oh, and also the Catholic Church records, which have come in very handy for folks that are doing genealogy research. It includes baptism records, marriage records, burial records, that kind of thing. And we have a really good microfilm viewer. It allows us to capture individual articles, and you can then print them or even make digital copies, and we can email them to you. So that's probably the most important thing there, maybe, I don't know. We have a good set of city directories. Those come in very handy for figuring out the intricacies of the local history from way back. They go as far back as 1871 and through the present again. We have cemetery records, funeral registries, a really good collection of local history books having to do with Los Angeles County and Trinidad in particular. A lot of files that the Historical Society put together over the years on all kinds of subjects and about personalities in Trinidad and things that happened, and those are real valuable. Let's see, we also have some indexes which are really good. In particular, a couple of obituary indexes. So every time they looked up an obituary, they would add it to the index. And so we have quite a few names of obituaries that we've already found. And a lot of times if somebody's looking for a family member, those come in handy. But also one that's all Colorado marriages, accidental mine deaths, which is really interesting also. And a lot of folks come to the library. My grandfather worked in a mine here. That's probably the most common research request I get. And many times, unfortunately, that grandfather died in an accident. And so we can find that record for them. Let's see. We have a limited photograph collection right now, and I'm in the process of cataloging that. And then finally, something that's actually available for anybody that has a library card, and that's a genealogy database called MyHeritage. And I know you're probably interested, you have probably heard of Ancestry.com. This is a real comparable database, and it's the library edition, which is a little more comprehensive than an edition that you might subscribe to. And those subscriptions cost quite a bit of money if anybody has done that before. This is open to anybody with a library card, and you can access it from our website and go use the database at home or anywhere else in the world, really, if you have a computer and the internet. Let's see. So there's two ways for you as the public to access this archive, because it is open to the public. First of all is research requests. We get probably about 100 research requests every year, and this is coming from all the states of the Union and even from foreign countries. And so when people can't really come to Trinidad, they'll send a research request, usually genealogy, but it could be any kind of historical question, and I do that research for them. One disadvantage is it costs money. There's a $15 an hour charge, and many times it might go 2 hours, 3 hours at the most. So I would call it a nominal charge for research. But also, they don't get to experience the actual looking through these files and at the newspapers and that kind of thing. So that's one access point. And you can either just contact the library, email, mail even, call up the library and request research. The other way is to visit the archive. And to do that, all you have to do is make an appointment. And you can spend 3 hours per visit there, and I'll be there to help you. The reason we make an appointment is I'm part-time, so I want to be there to show you around, to guide you through the process, show you how to use the viewer and that kind of thing. So, and again, that's free, and you get up to 3 hours. And that's a short version of what we have there. Are there any questions, or yes?
Tom, I get a lot of new homeowners that want historical knowledge about their property. Would that be something that would be? Yeah,
that's a common request. And Elizabeth mentioned surveys, and there was, I don't know if you all know about the survey that was done in 2000, I think it was 2000 to 2002 of the core zone district. Every building in the core zone district was, there was a article.
Survey.
Yeah, it was a survey.
Yeah.
So it was architectural information, history, who owned it, what kind of businesses were there, everything about how big it is, if there were renovations, restorations. It's really an amazing collection of information. And that includes all of downtown and a lot of the south side up to about 3rd Street. Unfortunately, it does not include the north side of town. And I think we're working on that. This last thing I heard, there's possible another survey might happen that'll build on that. But if your building is downtown, we've got the information for it. So.
Thank you, Tom. I
That
think
it?
we're
Any other
going to
questions?
head out to
All right.
the other Tom. Thank you so much.
Wow, nice crowd. Guys, I'm Tom Murphy. I'm the owner of Moy Murphy Funeral Home. Give you a little bit of my history real quick. I just came here to visit. I came in January of 1982 to visit my parents. They bought the funeral home from the previous owners in November. And I came all the way from South Dakota on a Greyhound bus, and I remember coming through, when we started to be able to see the peak. And I got behind the bus driver, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Because I'm from the cornfields of South Dakota. So, mountains are a big deal to me. It's like, that's really cool. Anyway, I came to visit, and it's a long story. It's a whole nother chapter of my life, but I'm still here. And I feel blessed now because I own this incredibly beautiful building that I've spent most of my adult life remodeling, and we're still remodeling it, and it probably is never going to end, because once I get it done, then I got to go back and start all over again. So we're working on the outside. We're still doing some stuff on the inside, but it's a beautiful building. As you can see here, this photo from 1937. The funeral home had been converted from a residence to a funeral home in 1934. And the funeral home before this was over where Rodney Wood was, and I believe it was the Pilar Funeral Home. George and Teresa Miller came and bought this from Dr. Espy, and they converted it. They added the part down here to the right, and I'll show you some clearer pictures here in just a little bit, to make it a funeral home where they could have caskets and they bring in the cars and everything. And an interesting story that people don't realize, Miller Funeral Home has been a part of Trinidad since 1934. And again, George and Teresa bought it and converted it, but what a lot of people don't know is right after they remodeled it and they're getting ready to have the grand opening, George Miller died in his sleep, and he was their first funeral. So Teresa Miller, who was a nurse, was able to get her funeral director license, and she continued on. A number of people worked for her in time. Jay Shimino's father bought the funeral home, but I don't think he bought the property at the time, and he died of a heart attack. You all know who Jay Shimino is, right? Yeah. His father died of a heart attack when Jay was in high school, and then Jay and his brother Ernie went on to join the military, and then he got in the car business, which is a little bit better moneymaker than the funeral business. He's clearly done pretty well. But before I get into this, and actually I'm going to start my clock here so I pay attention to the time. I want to acknowledge one person who's no longer with us. The stuff that I'm going to show you is because I was friends with Ken Fletcher for a while. And Ken Fletcher was the guy who spent a lot of time doing what Tom did over at the library. And you see Ken walking the streets, and when we had the newspaper, he would come in and talk to Paula, and we got to be friends. And I said, hey, I would really like to know more about my building, because my dad was told in the 1980s that the building was constructed in 1883, and we have it out there. Well, come to find out, we were wrong. It's 1886. That's the next piece that's going to get changed. It will be, reflect the correct date. But Ken Fletcher went back, and these books up here, these blue books, are articles that he researched from the beginning to the end that are on this building and the profession. So in time, I'm going to digitize all this and have a website so people can go in and view all this. I'm doing a kind of a Ken Burns type video on my building, because everything I've done in the last 40 years, I've documented with taking photographs and everything. So I'm really proud of that. But I saw this photo and I thought I would use this first, but I'm going to unplug this for a second because I want to go back to start the story at the beginning, and I want you guys to see all my cool photos before. So in 1982, I'm a sophomore, junior in college, and my parents tell me that we're moving to Trinidad, Colorado. And I'm like, oh, great, we're going to Colorado. I've been there once before. I helped my brother move to Boulder in 1977. It's like, yay. Are there ski resorts close by? My dad's like, oh, yeah, sure. At that time, though, actually, I think Kachara had been just opened. But anyway, they picked me up at the bus depot, which is over there by the credit union, by the college. And they drove me through town. And, at that time, it was kind of a bit of a depression. The mines had been open and closed, and there wasn't a lot of new builds, and as they came through Main Street. This is the first thing I saw, and I grew up with the Munsters and the Addams Family and things like that. I was like, what did you buy? I mean, look, if you look at it, the trees in front, you're like, what the heck? I mean, this is really old and kind of scary. I mean, you look at the trees, you'll see in other photos that they really had a fascination with putting trees. But behind these trees was this beautiful building. And slowly but surely, even the bushes. I mean, I've got some bushes out there, but they're not covering this up. I'm pretty sure this is right after we purchased. This is November, December of 1981. And you can see the chimneys on there, the stacks. The front walkway was very narrow. It had been a residence. So we went and came inside and was like, this is really, really old. But they were really busy. They were doing 20 funerals a month. I mean, it was an incredible business at that time. And so I went back to South Dakota, and then I ended up coming back for the summer of '82, summer of '83, and graduated from college in '84, and I moved to Denver, got an apartment. My dad called and said, hey, can you come back and help out? We have a thing going on. And I came back in the spring of 1984, and I'm still here. So, but going back to the building, because this isn't about me, George, I changed the name of the building to the Chappell House. Let me go back to this. Let's do this in order here. Chappell had come from Chicago, and he had done the waterworks. He had a rock quarry, and the story that we heard when we moved here, that this house was built as a payoff to keep him from bidding on the Capitol in Denver. And so I found, Ken Fletcher had shown me these, and so, you know, some of this was rumor, but when Ken gave me this, there's some truth to this. So as you read through this, Chappell returned last night from Santa Fe, where he went to interview New Mexico Capitol Commission on the subject of fine building stone, of which Mr. Chappell has a large quarry. D.A. Chappell is in Denver figuring with the Capitol Commission and offering to furnish them elegant Trinidad stone at reasonable prices. There's no doubt about the adoption of the Trinidad stone by the Commission unless there's an outside job in the stone heap. Well, I was at the Capitol quite a bit in 2012 getting a bill passed, and I'm pretty sure, and it would be easy to check this, but I don't think any Trinidad stone actually went into the building of this. But here's where it gets interesting. Well, this is backing up a little bit. There was a Mr. Keith who moved it to a lot on East Main Street and used it for a carpenter shop. There was a carpenter shop where the building is now. And a few weeks ago it was torn down to give a place for the new brownstone of D.A. Chappell. What's interesting is he was building furniture and things here. And you know, back in those days, what they built besides furniture? Caskets. Mm-hmm. So followed the, anyway. So here's the part that gets interesting. A letter received by Mrs. Chappell from her husband yesterday stated that his bid for stone for the new Capitol building was the lowest from Colorado. Unless the commissioners give the contract to Eastern parties, and it is not at all likely that they will, Mr. Chappell will secure it, in which event the DRNG will be extended to the city and the boom that we have sought will be inaugurated. Pretty interesting. But then there's this article, and then after that there's nothing on this. Work has been suspended at Chappell Quarries on account of washouts, as no stone can be handled until the roads are repaired. Well, this is about the time this house is getting built. And so whether it was the washout or whether, you know, the other people came in and said, you know what, look, don't come to Denver, just leave your stone there and we'll build you this nice fancy house. And, you know, so there, I think there's an inkling of truth to the possibility that that's what happened. So Chappell, when he was in Trinidad, he did the Trinidad Waterworks, he's part of the bank, he had the rock quarry, he was part of the trolley system, because I didn't want to include all this because I could have easily taken up 3 hours. But he had the trolley contract, and that was suspended. So he did a lot of different things. Well, he was here from the 1880s until about 1898. And then he moved to Denver and he built another mansion similar to this one that was torn down before Dana Crawford could get to it. And Dana told me she got a window, a stained glass window out of the carriage house there that she still has. And she knew Chappell's grandson pretty well. But they did tear it down in the 60s or 70s before she could save it. So Chappell moved to Denver and lived until 1916. And he died, he fell and hurt himself and died. And when he died, the paper listed said that he had assets worth $1.5 million. Imagine that. In today's dollars, how much he was really worth. That's a lot of money. Anyway, the building then was sold to one doctor, and there's a couple years where it wasn't really locked down, but Dr. Espy then bought the building, and he turned it into his doctor's office and his residence until the 1930s. So, and then Dr. Espy retired after about 30 years in practice, and that's when Millaire's bought the building and converted it into a funeral home, and they added the structure on the other side there, which I'll show you pictures of here in a second. The carriage house was always here, but so it was, it's been a funeral home since 1934, which is a long time. And I've been a part of this for, here's another interesting story. I'm gonna bounce around because I wasn't able to rearrange these photos. The foundation of Chappell's fine residence, which is being erected on South on Main Street, is now completed and ready for use. And I think the next one says, the family of D.A. Chappell has moved into the basement of their elegant new residence, which, by the way, gives them as much room as an ordinary house. The upper portion of the building will be completed in a short time. Well, an interesting note, when Paul and I got married, if you know my wife, Paula Murphy, she works over here at the dealership. We had the newspaper at the time. Well, we moved in, lived in the basement too for about 2-3 years while we were remodeling the upstairs. So history repeated itself. And actually, I loved living in the basement. It was nice and cool and breezy. And when we found out, it's like history repeated itself. When we purchased the funeral home in 1981, my dad right away started doing some remodeling. Because the building hadn't been touched since the 1950s. The only thing that had been done then is they added a forced air unit. They had a boiler and then they added a forced air unit. So when we came in here, it was pretty antiquated. And here it is 40 years later. I'm still, although most of it's done, the electrical and plumbing and all of it has had to be redone. So this, I'm kind of bouncing around here time-wise, but in the photos that we've been able to procure, this is, where did I, okay. I want to show you the one, I thought I took it. Oh gosh, I didn't do it. All right, so I have a photo outside there that's one of the pictures in the newspaper when shortly after it was built. But this is one of the earliest photographs that we have. And you can see the street is level here. And the next photo, you can see a wider view with the trolleys and the slope of Main Street. So you can see how it's dipping down. And the other structures, so this was built before, the one in the middle, those other two mansions are there, I guess. But here you see that's our peak right there. Those two buildings right there are where the post office is. And they were torn down, 1910 or somewhere in there to build the post office. But you can see the street work that they're doing there, right? So that's when they were going in and they're putting in the sewer and everything and they're leveling the street. So the street doesn't do this, the up and down. And then now you can see where the street's a little bit lower. We have the wall there. And you can see where they're putting in the trees, where they're starting to grow. And, now we've got the trolley, we've got the street paved. The street's even a little bit lower. We have the wall that is out there now and our front wall. And one thing that you can see, it's just barely visible, because in these other photos, if you look where I'm expanding right there, there's a white blur right there. Those are the steps that are outside there. As you walk outside the building, there's a bunch of lumber and everything over there right now. The steps that are outside, the metal steps, weren't added until approximately 1910, because if you go back in these photos, the steps aren't there. Can't see it there, but even in this, the steps weren't there. So there's a porch up here, right to the right where that post is, and you'll see a picture of that in a little bit. So that was isolated, and they didn't have access up. So at some point, Dr. Espy added that, I think, in his tenure. Come back. All right, so you're going to get a little preview of where we're going with all this. So this is the funeral home today. We're in the process of painting the outside, and as a small business, it's like I can't just get it all done at one time. So you can see the red that we have up there on top of the blue, and the brown colors, that's going to be following that all the way around. The red's going to be on top, the blue's going to be on the middle, and we'll paint the backside here, but it's you know, it's been white for a long time, and before I got married, everything in this house was white. And when I married Paula, she said, you know, you can paint it back if you don't like it. So we started adding color into the funeral home, which is, you know, perked it up a little bit. And so we've made some changes. So if you notice outside, what we did is I changed the name of the building. We're still a funeral home, as we've been for all these years, but I wanted to neutralize, you know, because this is more than a funeral home. I mean, we've had weddings here, we've had graduation parties, we've had political meetings. It's a venue, it's not just a funeral home. And so I wanted it to reflect that, because we're about to make a really big change on the other side. On this side where you see the garages, up above that is a giant room that used to have 30 caskets in it. And, you know, with the change in the funeral business, so many people are being cremated, I didn't need to keep a large inventory of caskets. And so what we do now is when we do need a casket, we just call and get it delivered out of Albuquerque. So I have this giant room that's almost half this size, and I was trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do with it? And we thought of making it a yoga studio, but it wasn't big enough for that. I could have turned it into an apartment, but I really didn't want anybody I really didn't know cooking below me and not being safe. And so my wife got me into yoga about 5-6 years ago, and I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how to monetize this space. And so what we're going to do on that side, some of you may have heard of this, but if you know what deprivation tanks or isolation tanks are, they float in salt water. So we are on the other side here going to put in 2 isolation tanks or flotation tanks. Then we're going to have a space for acupuncture, massage, and things like that. It's going to be totally isolated. The funeral side is going to be over here, and people are going to go around. It's going to be fenced off, and you go through the gate and everything on the other side where we're doing the work out there. And that's why we changed the name. You're coming to the Chappell house, not to Malheur Murphy Funeral Home. I mean, we have in this building just under 16,000 square feet. So if you look where the garage is, well down below the garage, where the garage doors are here, is the carriage house, and I'll show you pictures of that in a second. But where the white garage doors are is a large garage, and I was going to take pictures of that and walk you all the way through it. But we've had sewer problems, we're remodeling, and some of the rooms are a mess. So it's like, my wife would beat me if I showed you pictures of all that in its state right now. But so we have the garage there, and where this window is right here, where we just rebuilt the wall, is more of a basement. I'll show you pictures of that. And then we have the main floor where the red trim is, where you guys are now. And then up above where the blue is our residence. And then the triangle where the 1883 is actually about a 1,200 square foot attic, which I'll show you a couple pictures of. So when you add this all together, the garage, the basement, this main floor, our residence and the attic, and the carriage house, there's just under 16,000 square feet. I mean, it's deceiving, because it doesn't, when people come in here, they get lost. They don't, you know, there's so many doors. Even Bobby and other people that have worked here, they're like, where am I at again? Because you walk in the one door and there's 4 doors in one room. It's like, so it's a little bit confusing. But I have spent, say, most of my adult life fixing this up, and I'm not done yet. But this, so walking you through back over here would be the garage. This is in the basement. In this room here, actually I got a better, this is one of the back rooms. This back room here, here's the bedroom. This room right here is right below in the living room out there. And that room there had a forced air unit that took up about 3/4 of the room. Well, in 1996, we remodeled and we completely did the heating system here. Rich Dickinson, who is a genius plumber, he did all the work. And so we took that out of there, and then I have this giant room, and even that door right there is storage. So what am I gonna do with it? Well, I was friends with Stevie Alonti, who had the Main Street Bakery, and come to find out he was a 4th or 5th degree black belt, and we started in my basement. He taught me for 10 years. But this back room, you had to duck underneath, and back in the 40s, 50s, well, not the 40s, maybe the 50s, 60s, and 60s. People don't remember, some of you that are older might, but funeral homes were the ones that ran the ambulance service. And so, the funeral homes did that for a number of years because they had the cars that could ferry the people, and they got cots. And so they would scoop and run. Well, we had college students living here for a long time, and this is one of the rooms they lived in. Of course, it's completely, cleaned out and got all this equipment in it now. But there was room we had for years, we had a lot of people stopping back and saying, I lived in the basement while I was going to college here, and we ran the ambulance service. So, and that is below, on your way out there. So those 2 rooms, but we've utilized every bit of space in this building. This is the stairway going up. The screen is blocking right now. When people look at the stairway, we did a wedding here, and Pete, the gal stood in the stairway. That's not the greatest shot of it, because we've got some stuff going on. But this is upstairs in our living room. And I don't have every room. I just thought I would give you a general idea of how much we've done here. That room right there in the 1980s, you could put a candle in it in the middle of the room and it blew out. And my dad's like, we gotta insulate this. So I was in my 20s, and it was before I hurt my back in a basketball game in '87. And so we knocked out all the plaster. Where those red couches are, that's about how high it was. I'm surprised we didn't collapse it. That's how strong this is. But I hauled all that plaster out, and I filled up the dumpster. And then the trash people came and called and said, I filled it up with the plaster, and they said, we can't lift it. So then I had to go back out and I had scooped 2/3 of it out. And then a week later, I put another 1/3 in, and a week later, I put another 1/3 in. But we then insulated it, and we changed the windows, and that's my wife's put some color in it, thank God for that. This is the porch that I was telling you that we didn't have access to. To the right there is the stairway going down. My friend Tom Potter's been up here many times because he and his wife have come over many times to watch movies with us. Got a great view of seeing what's going on at Reno's. There used to be one of those giant trees right outside there, and people couldn't see up there. They didn't know it was there. Until we cleared some of these trees away, people didn't know how beautiful this building was. And that's one of the things that evolved through the years as we got rid of these trees. But the interesting thing was, people would be down there talking, and my parents would be sitting out there, and they picked up on some scuttle, in town that, because they didn't realize people were sitting up there. And then somebody jumped in a car, and, that shouldn't have been with the people they were with, and there's a lot of stories. But yeah, that tree finally died too. All the trees eventually died and got taken out. This is our kitchen. We just put a roof on last October. There's some holes in the ceiling where we had a leak that I couldn't find for 12 years. That's one thing about old homes. Could not find it. Even had a roofer's look it all over, and I was on the ceiling or on the roof in the chimney, and I film parades and have since 2005, for the people at home that can't attend. And I was getting ready a few years ago for it, and I had the front door open. I was going back and forth, and a guy and his wife showed up, and he was an architect from Rapid City, South Dakota. And he said, hey, this is a really fascinating building. Could you give us a quick tour? And I'm like, yeah, what the heck? So I ran him upstairs real quick, and he said, what's going on with the ceiling? I said, well, we got a water leak, and I can't find it. Well, we walked out to the deck. Well, this is the kitchen, the rest of the kitchen. You can see the stuff on the right here. We're getting ready to repair that stuff. That's why every room there's equipment. Anyway, we go out on this is the deck that's over there. We went around the corner, and the architect said it's right there. It wasn't on top of the building, it was on the side of the building running in. So we finally, now that we have the roof, we can go back and repair it. But this kitchen here, we decided to make it really big because my wife is from Trinidad and she's got a really big family. And so the holidays, it was, you know, we're gonna have 30, 40 people in there, and we do at times. So we made it as big as possible. The seating along the edge was the parapet that was there that we were able to cover. When we wanted to expand over the flat roof, which is out here, the engineer, Vern Jasky, who has since passed away, you know, they went and they made sure that we were able to carry the load all the way down. There's a couple of I-beams in here that are carrying the load. You can see my torn sails. That's from those 90 mile an hour winds that we had several months ago, and I got to repair those. But we love spending time out there. We watch some movies out there. This is just the hallway leading up to what we call our cabin. Our cabin is where we go in with Tom and some others and watch movies. This is the top of the stairs, the bedroom. There's 4 different areas. We're able to put a bedroom up here. This is the pool room, and then the TV room over here. And when I was up here getting ready to do this, I was standing outside, and I looked up at the window and I said, 5 levels. That's not good if there's a fire. And so if you see there's railing out there outside this window here. This is one of those aha moments when you're doing things and like, you know, that would really suck if we had a fire and we were up in the attic and, you know, the fire department didn't get to you right away. I don't want to jump. And so I told my guys, I said, Rick Lasser, I said, we need to put, you know, railing there. And it really was important because if you remember, we had a snowstorm here in 2007, 2008 between Christmas and New Year's where we had about 4 feet of snow. You guys remember that? Well, on New Year's Eve, I get a call. We had 4 feet of snow. I wasn't going anywhere. We got a call from the hospital and someone had passed away. Well, I didn't have a 4-wheeler at that time. It would have taken me hours to dig out. And so I called Jim Soltis, the city manager, and said, Jim, can you help me out? I said, I need to get to the hospital and I can't get out. 10 minutes later, my driveway was clear. And while I was out there, my wife calls and says, the priest called and said, there's a bus from this Catholic church in Fort Worth and they're stuck at Walmart. They'd been there for 3 days. Can you help out? Well, I'd just given the priest a tour the month before. He says, Tom, you got the room. Would you help us out? I'm like, 50 people, okay. So I bring the person back. We have refrigeration. I put the person in refrigeration. And I made my way to Walmart. I emptied out the seats and I walked in and there's some kids in ski gear and I said, you guys the ski group? And they said, yeah, our parents, where are your parents at? So I go over there and there's a woman praying. And I said, hey, I'm Tom. This is weird as I think about it even now. Get a little emotional. It's like, I'm the guy from the funeral home. I know sounds kind of weird, but if you come with me, I'll give you guys a place to stay tonight. And they're kind of like, I just said, trust me. You know, the weird thing was getting from here through Main Street was tough, but on the interstate it was almost dry, and then back in Walmart it was all messed up. But it still took me almost 5 hours ferrying 6, 7 people at a time to bring them all here. We ended up with 22 kids, 2 parents as supervisors, and the rest of the parents stayed at the hotel that's now closed down the street. And then they walked over here, and it was like fishes and loaves. We had stuff, they brought stuff. We had the best New Year's Eve party we ever had. And 20 kids up in the attic here having a good time. And, you know, and so the next day they were from the Catholic Church. And then the next day, so 50 kids sleeping here. And the next day they got up, they had a little chapel service here, and then they were able to bring the bus in, you know, from there and then go out and then get back on the interstate and go. What had happened, they'd been in there for 3 days, they were camping in the I Center. They had gone and got camping gear and everything, and they were told, get back on the bus, the pass is open. So they gathered up all their stuff, they got on the bus, and they said the pass is closed. And that's when they went back into Walmart, they're brokenhearted, and they called the church, and the priest's like, I know a guy. So it was very rewarding to do that for this. So I mean, this building, I just have all these stories, and I'm looking at the time, and so we've got about 6 minutes. give you guys some time to ask questions. I could have easily done 3 hours. I have photos of everything that I've done, as I've changed things out. But more than anything, as a guy that didn't want to be here, didn't want to live in a small town, didn't want to be a funeral director, Trinidad has become my home, and this building is my heart. And it gives me anxiety to know that I haven't gotten it all painted, and it's deteriorated a little bit. But you can only do what you can afford, and we are slowly but surely making it happen. But I'm proud of this building, and whoever gets it next is going to have quite an asset. I think it's been a huge asset and an anchor for this part of Trinidad. This property down below too is mine. I bought that from the railroad, and I know it's got weeds in it right now, but my intention for the next phase, when we get everything done here, is I'm going to put a water feature out there, and I'm going to put a labyrinth in there where people can go and walk. Being a part of yoga, there's like 7 parts of yoga, and in Christianity, there's 7 different baptism and different things. And it's just going to be a place for people to go and reflect and walk. And so that's what the plans is for the property down there. Just like everything else, it takes time, but I've looked at this as a marathon, not a sprint. So, but I put it at 30 minutes, and I'm within 15 seconds. Yes?
And does your mother still live here with you?
My mother, 6.5 weeks ago, had a heart attack. And they said it's a widowmaker, and they said she's not going to survive. And we didn't know she was having a heart attack. We just thought she was, really low energy. She's 94, and up until 6-7 weeks ago, she was still smoking. So, but she didn't die. 9 out of 10 people die, and there's no valve damage or anything. And I've told people, I don't want to cause any controversy, but we stopped giving her Advil, Tylenol, aspirin, ibuprofen, any of that 4 years ago. We've been giving her like 2 gummies a day for pain, just general pain. She's 94, and she's upstairs and doing really well. We brought her home in hospice just because you get more care, but I don't know. The hospice is like, you're getting better. So, but it's been her home too, and mine, more hers than mine, because I was gone for a few years. But
what's her name?
Mary Ellen. So, yeah, the doctors in my family saying, you got to say goodbye, and it's like, and they said she's conscious. I'm like, yeah, you want to talk to her? And my sister's a hospice nurse, and she's like, she's conscious. I'm like, yeah, she never lost consciousness. She's never in any pain.
Wow.
So that's one little thank you. We still have her. So, and actually, I have a sibling that's about to arrive here in a couple hours to see her. One of the reasons I'm here, but that's a whole nother story. So, but when I look at this photo here, it's fascinating to see the trees, vehicles. Flower cars, limousines, hearses. It was all a big deal with the cars. I'm down to just a pallbearer car and a hearse. It's like I'm too small of a business to have a bunch
I'd like
of
to have
those.
that Packard hearse there.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That was a big deal back in the day because they didn't, not everybody had cars. So, the fact that funeral home could afford them, that's what they did. Where they stored them, I don't know, because they didn't fit in that garage that we had down there. So, but let me just scroll through these. Yeah, this is Tom's familiar with that area. But yeah, when we had the kids from Fort Worth, they said that when I had 20-some kids upstairs, that fire escape really mattered to me. Because I pointed out to them, I said, if there's an issue, you go out that window, and that window is what they call an egress window, that a fireman could get in and out with a thing on his back. And so I was like, you guys go out that, and you go to the right, and you're on the ground. And so there's been a lot of thought into everything that I've done here. Outside there, as I said, we're going to be fencing that part off. And the name, we're trying to come up with a name for what we're going to do. And we want to have it a little bit humorous, a little play off of the funeral home. So the name of the spa is going to be Eternal Floating Spa. So you can come de-stress, get a massage, float in salt water, But,
You experience any spirits in the whole building? Unusual?
you know, a couple little things, but not bad. We were sitting on that red couch one night, and I had two cats, two sister cats. They're black and white, and we're watching TV, and the one cat was on one edge of the sofa, on the bigger one, on the 3-cushion one, and was on the other one. And coming from the bottom here and going over in the door here, but coming from here, I don't know what it was, but the cats both got up and their fur went out like a cartoon. And they watched something go around behind us. And we just said, if you're friendly, you can stay. If not, you have to go. But as far as, and there are a couple other, here's one of the best stories, because I have, can I take one more minute? Because we wait 10 minutes. Last story. So when we were remodeling the carriage house, and I'm going to tell you this, I said this to a crowd of people at Mount Carmel. I said, why did you get into historic preservation? And I told Dana Crawford and a crowd of about 100, I said, for sex. So they're like, what? Well, I said, when my father died in 1993, I was 30-something living with my mother. It's like I was never going to get a date. And I'd had women ask for their phone numbers back after I told them what I did. So I said, I started remodeling so I could at least have my own place, you know, and it's like, because I can imagine a girl saying, you live with your mother? Yeah, okay. I'm not so sure about that. And you're a funeral director? But anyway, when we were remodeling down there, I'd hurt my back, and I got a guy to clear out the floor for me, because you could still smell the horses 100 years later. And there, you know what wainscoting is? Yeah. So I went in there, and my back was hurting. I just wanted to do something, so I walked over in the kitchen, and I pulled down the wainscoting, and out pops a wallet. I have copies of this. I was going to do this, but I didn't think I'd have time. So it had pictures, it had IDs. The guy's name was Pete Lucero. He was born in 1928 in Honey, and he died in 1953 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And there's pictures of the family, pictures of Las Vegas, and why was the wallet there? Well, this is a Wednesday, and this is back when we had the old cell phones, the big walkie-talkie size. I have to answer the phone 24/7. So I go over and I have lunch with a friend of mine that had the sign shop, and we were across from Grego's when Sabine had her restaurant there. And I'd asked a couple of people, I said, you ever heard of Pete Lucero? You know, he's born in 1928, same year my mom was born. This is almost 30 years ago, so some people might have known him. So no. And so on Friday afternoon, we're having lunch with my buddy, and I get a phone call, and they said, hey, we were just in Trinidad, and we were looking at all our family graves, and one of our family members doesn't have a marker on it. And you guys buried him. Could you look it up? And I said, what's his name? And they said, his name's Pete Lucero. I'm like, was he born in 1928? And they said, yes. I said, he died in 1953 in Las Vegas. They said, yes. How did you know that? Did you do his funeral? I said, I wasn't even born. I said, I found his wallet. I photocopied all this. I have this downstairs. They were here at 6 o'clock. That night, a dozen of them. And then the photos and stuff, that's cousin such and such, and that's whatever.
That's amazing.
What? That's kind of one of those, makes your hair kind of go up on back. It's like, whoa, how did that happen? Well, he committed suicide in Las Vegas, and I think what happened is they shipped his body back here. And when it got here, whoever opened it up, because this is what we do. I mean, when we ship people, you know, you'll include their personal effects with them. So I think when it got here, I think there's money in that wallet. Money, and then it got dumped, and then like, if the wallet's there and the money's not there, you know, where's the money? If there's no wallet, we don't know, there was no wallet, and I find it almost 30 years later. So anyway, guys, it's been a pleasure. I went a little bit long. It could have gone longer, bounced around a little bit, but I hope you're entertained.
Thank you so much.
And more than anything, historic preservation. I'm doing it, and I'm proud to own this building now. It just takes a lot of money. But with the historic designation, I'll be applying for the tax credits with what I did on the roof, and looking for other grants and things. So thank you, guys.
Wow, cool stories. We headed across the street. For anyone who's interested, please join us at the History Museum. It's right up the